So are you a story which can be told? So from an early age, we're told stories continuously. We're told stories to help us learn language. We're told stories to help us learn what is good or bad for us. We're told many stories. It helps us communicate and it helps us navigate around our society and have a complex society like we have. And we're taught to rely on stories, to rely on where things are. So even the story of where something is, so where the supermarket is, that's a story that you're told of how to get there. The directions aren't facts, they're stories. We've made up words which are like markers for our environment, and then we move through these stories to the supermarket or to your friend's house or to school. But all of it consists within stories. You could say the human world's foundation is made on stories. Like the way that we survive so well is stories. Even science is stories. It's not a fact that we're a ball moving around the sun. We've made up all those words and we're kind of guessing because there's so much information which we don't have. So we're kind of saying, yeah, this is the way it works, and we sound like that's really the. But they're super helpful because if we didn't have it, we wouldn't be able to have a complicated society. We'd be like dogs, you know, we can communicate to each other how to move a table. So if something gets stuck under the table, we can communicate that through stories, how we move the table. But the dogs can't. They obviously can have some form of very simplistic thinking, like dogs understand us or cats understand us to an extent. Certain words like Khaleesi, my dog, understands sit, stay. She understands ah. And she understands facial expressions, you know, when I look at her in certain ways. And I understand dog behavior, so I manipulate dog behavior to get her to do as I say. Even now, I'm communicating to you through sets of stories, through words put together, which make up an overview for your intellect to kind of feel like it's got a grasp of what my meaning is. But meaning isn't inherent in life. Life doesn't have an inherent meaning. It's something that humans have made up and shared and put into story format and have these meanings. And in our stories, so in our things like films, we have a particular way in which we present that story. And I'm sure emotionally, that has a huge effect on us of how we present our stories. So in films, like what I grew up with, although TV is becoming more popular than films, so films and storybooks, we have acts and arcs. So in theatre and in film, there are arcs to the film. So normally the stories are based on overcoming complications. So first of all, a typical story would be the person is happy, they have a great life, and then boom, something happens which changes everything. And we are excited to watch and learn how that person deals with that catastrophe or difficulty or complication. And that's what interests us in story. We're not interested in a story or a film where somebody's just simply like running through a field of poppies or a field of beautiful flowers. We're like, after half an hour, all of us are bored. Except some that are enlightened, they're just like, oh wow, look at the light, the light, the light. But the rest of the people are like, come on, let's have something happen. And that's how we see our lives in a way. We see our life through events and catastrophes and difficulties and then overcoming them or not overcoming them. And when people tell them, they tell them in the sort of way that we watch them or we read them or we hear them from others. It's like a hypnosis of stories in which we tell each other. So you maybe look at your life in a little bit of a way of a storytelling film, book, novel. So you're sort of like, when I was 10, this happened and that happened. Like you don't pick non-events when you tell people the story of your life. You pick events to tell. So you pick you know, when you moved house or when your parents bought a new dog or when they had another child or when they separated. So when you're telling the story of you, it's events. Also like the stories and the films that we watch on TV. Sorry, just let me close my mail. For some reason it's deciding that it has to open. You don't have to open mail. It's got a life of its own, my mail. Got distracted by the mail. So when you tell your stories, you tell it in a similar way. You're picking out the arcs of your story during the day. When you come home and someone says, how are you? You have to pick what you tell people. And it's unlikely that you're going to tell them that, oh, I went to the toilet 3 times. You know, I sat on my chair 4 times. I felt the floor beneath my feet when I was walking. The sky was very blue. The room was warm. That's unlikely what you're going to tell. What you're going to tell is your arc. So it's like someone says, how are you? Did you have a good day? And you're like, yeah, I had a good day, but my boss was an asshole and he said this and she said that. And that's what we identify with, is these dramas, is these arcs of us. So if something difficult happens, so say if you get home and there's a challenge, like your whole house is flooded, then maybe you think, why does it happen to me? It always happens to me. And then you pick out 20 times where it's happened to you. But there's also a billion other times when that hasn't happened to you, but you're fitting it into all these arcs of who you are. So you can see yourself as a victim, or you can see yourself as a non-victim and super successful. It doesn't matter, because you can pick all those things out of your life. Everybody has arcs. That's the nature of story. Like just in one day, there's lots of arcs and challenges you've had to overcome. Today, I went for blood tests in French. Let me tell you, I was like a gymnastics. How do you say that person? Person that does gymnastics. I was like a gymnastics, with my I'm beginning to get sentences in French, but going to the doctors and blood testing in French is a little bit more complicated, and then dealing with the French healthcare system, which is the first time I've used. And you've got a little card, and you don't get a card in England, and you stick it into a card machine and you don't get that, and then you have to pay some as well. And it was quite the acrobatics, but it was super successful, and I really enjoyed the adventure of it. But maybe some people would tell that story as in like, oh, it was really awful, and the French didn't do this, and they didn't do that, and it's different. You can tell your stories whatever way you like it, and none of it means you, because who is this person you're talking about? It's a past event that doesn't exist now. So who is this you that's had dramas or challenges? When you're identified with your arcs, and especially if you tell yourself negative stories about yourself, it's very uncomfortable. If you tell yourself positive stories, then maybe it's a little bit better, but still it's a cage, because how can you be something that's in the past, a story that's in the past, and a story that's always based on arcs and dramas? That's not who you are. You're not a drama. You're this moment, and this moment in a way is dramaless. There's nothing here. There's nothing that means anything here. There is simply life happening for nobody, and it's free. But who do you see yourself to be? A story in time or this moment? Most people would identify with a story in time. They would say, I'm a body. I'm what's happened to the body. I'm my good events, bad events, my age, my looks, my wealth. And none of that's here. Even your body isn't here, because you're looking out of the body, but you're not actually seeing the whole entire body. You're kind of seeing hands maybe, and that's about it. Maybe if you've got a very big nose, you see your nose. But if you haven't, if you've got a nice petite fat nose like me, then you can't really see your nose unless you do that. So maybe you see your hands. And if you do see your hands, everyone should decorate your hands, because that's all you ever see of yourself. You're just like walking hands, like. I love talking about this subject. I love it. I love it. I love it. And even me saying, I love it, who is this I that you imagine me to be? To me, it's spontaneous happening coming out of my mouth. And yes, it behaves just like Lisa, which is really unique and individual to her, but it's not a somebody. It's not somebody that independently exists. It's a part of this life which is not separate. It's one life expressing itself as multiple, but it isn't multiple. It's one, not two. This is why these talks, or what I teach, is non-duality. This isn't a separate life. So then the question comes, Lisa, look, all we're concerned about is how do we get out of suffering? You never had suffering. Who is this you that had suffering? So this person that you imagine that had suffering is a story already in the past. It's not you. It's not you. Who you are is this. Who you are is this, which is not a thing. Who is looking now? Who looks out of your eyes? Your mind might keep trying to go to something, but who is that? Even the personal awareness that's inside the body isn't you. That's being experienced. That's not an experiencer. So the personal awareness is the movement for the lens. So you put your attention on me, you put the attention outside, but that's known. So that's something that's appearing in the dream. So that can't be you. There's something beyond that. There's something that knows that. And who is that knower that knows the person that's moving the lens and saying, oh, I'm going to go make myself a pina colada. Who is that one that knows that? It's totally mysterious, but it's the most intimate sense of being. It's so close to you. It's so intimate. Who are you? Who speaks now? So you might say, okay, but I'm the person speaking. Well, maybe you're not speaking, maybe you're listening, but say if you were to say, I'm the person that can speak. But how do you do that? How do you do speaking? It's just so normal to you that you just have told yourself so many times, I speak, I speak, I speak. It feels like you, but how? How do you do speaking? How? And it comes with this sense of choice. But scientists say that that one that says, I spoke and claims it all is coming after the impulse, the doing of it. So when you speak, the one that's saying, I just spoke, is actually happening after the one that spoke. They even think that the choice to do something happens after the actual choice. So the conscious choice to do something happens after the choice to do it, which totally changes your view. So maybe you don't like yourself, maybe you blame yourself for your life events, but how did you choose to do any of your life events? There's something that happened. It just came with a feeling of you doing it, but it didn't mean you as a separate person were doing it, because who is this separate person anyway? Who are you? The teachings of non-duality do two things. One, they are reminding you of something beyond you, and two, they're relaxing that person that's so invested in itself, has so much attention on itself.